Hello, everybody. This is Al. Thanks so much for following our channel. We're up to 105 followers. We couldn't have done it without you. I'm here with you, reporting from Asuncion, Villamor Asuncion, the richest neighborhood for the politically elite and the most successful business people. This is where they live. Go take a look. Modern buildings, wonderful shopping mall. Here, there is no trash, there is no homeless people begging, there is nobody trying to rob you at gunpoint. This is the best of the best of Paraguay. This represents about 2% of the general population, if that. So if you have a lot of money in Paraguay, if you're a Paraguayan citizen who works in the U.S. and a lot of them have apartments here, this is where you want to be. Via more. What is wrong with this? Where is the problem here? And this is, by the way, what they call an eighth world country, not even a third world country. But don't be fooled. Most of Paraguay is not like this. Yeah, this is where you want to be in Paraguay, and it's only going to cost you about $600 in Airbnb. And with our consultation services for a very reasonable fee, affordable fee, we can get you situated. So, guys, here I am again with Professor Keith Preston, and today the topic that we're going to discuss is Trump's tariffs. See, Donald Trump has been elected president. Love him or hate him, he's going to be our president for the next 4 years, if he makes it that far. But he'll definitely change this country profoundly. Donald Trump wants to implement strong tariffs, like banning foreign goods, like Chinese, Paraguayan goods. The Paraguayans are up in arms now. And the idea here is that the U.S. should be the manufacturing base. But there are some trade-offs here. See, first of all, tariffs will make dollars scarce. And when a product becomes scarce, the value of the dollar goes up. So if you become an expatriate now, well, you're gonna increase your purchasing power. You're gonna spend more money. Rather, you'll be able to buy more with less. You're gonna spend less money, you'll buy more. But the flip side of this, if foreign products become less affordable, well, your purchasing power in the United States will drop. You'll be poorer in the United States, but you'll be richer in foreign countries like Paraguay. Like, look at this. You can pay $600 to go live right up there, right next to some politician in parliament, right next to some senator who may well be president of the country. So, Professor Preston, please give us your hot take on Donald Trump's tariffs and what this means for us expatriates.
Well, if we look at the economic policy proposals that are coming out of the Donald Trump camp, and if we look at the people that Trump is appointing to various positions, there's a common theme that emerges. And it's clear that the incoming Trump administration is going to be big on increasing the value of the dollar on an international level, because we have to remember that the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And the Trump administration is clearly big on increasing the value of the dollar internationally. Now, that can be helpful to some people. For example, if you're an investor in U.S. bonds, that's helpful. If you're a shareholder in a multinational corporation that's heavily dependent on a global supply chain, that can be helpful. Certainly, if you have investments in, say, oil production in places like Saudi Arabia, which is dependent on imports, it can also be helpful. And there are other ways in which a high dollar value or raising the value dollar on an international level can be helpful. But there's a downside to this, and that is if we look at the policies that the Trump camp now is talking about putting into place once they come into office, we see that they want to impose across the board tariffs along with labor deportations, that is, deportations of illegal immigrant workers, and a number of other policies as well that collectively are likely to have an inflationary effect. For instance, we know that in recent years in the United States, we've had problems with inflation. Some of that stems from the impact of the pandemic and the disruption of supply chains that happened during the pandemic, as well as perhaps other policies that were pursued. Inflation started to spiral after the pandemic. It probably reached its peak a couple of years ago. Now it's starting to decrease a little bit, but it's still not back to where it was before the pandemic. Now, the concern is if these policies that the Trump people are talking about putting into place are implemented, it's quite likely that the progress that's been made as far as reducing inflation is going to be reversed, and that inflation is once again going to become a problem for a range of reasons. For example, tariffs have the effect of raising consumer costs because the cost of import goods is higher, and that gets passed on to consumers. Think about slapping a 25%, 45%, whatever price increase on all the things that you go buy from, say, Walmart or somewhere like that. That's the effect of tariffs on inflation. Also, whatever your position politically on the immigration issue, if large numbers of low skilled or low income workers are removed from the labor market, that's going to raise labor costs. That means the costs of production are going to be higher. Businesses are going to have to absorb more costs of production. That's going to get passed on to consumers as well. There's also talk of doing things like eliminating a lot of public sector jobs that are associated with this thing called the administrative state, and we don't need to get into all the politics of that. But if there is a large-scale layoff of public sector workers, while that could be good for the economy big picture-wise in terms of, say, reduced deficits and things like that, in the short term, it can have the effect of increasing unemployment, which has the effect of reducing consumption, which in turn has a recessionary effect. And these are obviously two things that we need to be concerned about, increased inflation and also the possibility of a recession. We have to remember, for example, that when inflation starts to go up, the Federal Reserve, which sets monetary policy for the United States, will often raise interest rates. And that can be helpful as far as controlling inflation, but the negative consequence of that is that it can have a recessionary effect. For instance, we had that problem way back in the early 1980s when in the late 70s in the United States, when Jimmy Carter was president, inflation was out of control. The Federal Reserve raised the interest rates significantly to about 20.5%. And then that did get inflation under control, but then at the cost of a recession, a pretty serious recession in the early 1980s. And that actually caused the Republicans, Ronald Reagan was president by that time, and that actually caused the Republicans to get hammered in the 1982 midterms. So we could see a repeat of this in the present time as well. So now is not really a good time to be an American consumer because it's likely that inflation is going to once again start to increase in the years ahead if these policies are pursued, tariffs and things of that nature. It's also possible that there could be a recessionary effect with increased unemployment and issues of that type as well. At the same time, though, the upside, the positive side is the value of the dollar on an international level will be increased, even if it's decreased on the domestic level. So that means it's a great time to start thinking about becoming an expat because if the value of the dollar is going up, then if you go somewhere where the cost of living is low and you actually have American money and savings, or you're a remote worker, you work online, or you have a business or something like that, then you can go to places like Paraguay, where Al is now, and live very, very cheaply. And you don't have to go to Paraguay. There's all kinds of places around the world where if you have American money, you can actually live very cheaply, whether it's in Eastern Europe or parts of Southern Europe, like Southern Spain, or in the Philippines, or throughout Latin America, or East Asian countries. So there's a lot of options available based on what your needs are in other areas, what you prefer as far as climate and as well as cost of living and other factors like that. But we can expect that based on what the incoming Trump administration is saying about trade policy, tariff policy, fiscal policy, monetary policy, immigration policy, a lot of other things, we can expect that there's going to be some serious economic difficulties ahead in terms of things like inflation, perhaps a recession, perhaps a combination of the two. So it's good to be prepared for that. And now is a good time to think about becoming an expat.
Well, Keith, so can you say definitively that this is the right time to become an expat? And I have just one question for you. Why are you still in the United States? How do you reconcile that?
Well, now's a good time to think about becoming an expat if you're concerned about inflation and you want to go somewhere where the cost of living is going to be lower and the value of the dollar is high. That in the years ahead, that the opportunities there are going to be significant. Now, I personally am not an expat because I have various professional and familial and other ties to the domestic United States that make it difficult for me to become an expat. But if you are someone that is capable of becoming an expat, whether it's you're a remote worker, whether you have lots of money in savings, you're a retired person, whether you're drawing Social Security. I mean, you if you're making $2,000 a month in Social Security, you can go to countries like some Latin American countries, some South Pacific countries, some East Asian countries, and you can live like an upper middle class person very easily. You can, in some of those places, you can rent a condo like apartment for the equivalent of $300 a month in American money. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities available if the value of the U.S. dollar increases internationally relative to other currencies, and every indication is that it will. Meanwhile, inflation is likely to be a problem in the United States. So if you're concerned about that, if that's an issue for you and you're capable of becoming an expat, now's the time to start thinking about that.
All right, guys, thanks so much for following our channel. We're over 100 viewers. We look forward to providing you with more wonderful content. This is Al here in Villamora, Paraguay. Wonderful neighborhood, top elite neighborhood. You can live here for $600 or less. And Professor Keith Preston will keep you posted on the political and sociological trends. He's a sociology professor, has been in academia for over 20 years. And we will keep you updated on how this Trump presidency will change the value of your dollar and whether this is really the right time to relocate. Yeah, thanks so much, and we'll be back soon.